Oh, drag it.
Oh,
Hey, and we're back. So as we're getting ready to launch a bunch of new live streams, we decided that we would try and experiment with a new feature each time until we figure out the full range of features. And this time it was playing a video. So now we've figured out how to get back from a video. Welcome back. It says you're back, but tiny.
Oh.
Are we big enough now? So some of these comments are coming through. I know we're back. And Diane says we can see you. That's wonderful. We never fully finished introducing Karen because we got sidetracked on a competition ego buster where Stefan decided to claim the title of urinal changer.
Okay, yeah, we can move on from that now.
We'll move on from that. And so Karen is here with us. Obviously, she's won. I think you said you represented the U.S. in 5 global bartending competitions.
Yeah, I think I have like a 90% win rate on all the competitions I did.
Amazing.
Which is pretty amazing.
I did a lot of them. It was just a thing I got good at after a while.
So, great competition bartender, spent a lot of time in LA at some quite notable spots, which we can go through that pedigree later if we'd like.
Sure.
And she's currently the portfolio ambassador for Collectif 1806 and looking after the Remy Cointreau portfolio. So, I would love to hear a little bit about Collectif. I mean, I know a little bit about it, and I love the project, but if you could give us a little bit of that, and then we'll go into making our martini.
Sure. So the long and short of it is Collectif 1806 is Remy Cointreau's bartender engagement program. So we do education, we do activations and events. Pretty much if it involves bringing the knowledge of the beautiful spirits in our portfolio to the masses, that's what we do. But we do tend to focus on bartenders within the industry. So the products in the portfolio, obviously, Remy Martin Cognac, Cointreau, that really beautiful gin that you saw in the how-to video, the Botanist, back here, which you can probably slide that
let's slide it over.
way up to the front. There you go. Some Isla-made gin right there. Bruichladdich, Scotch again from Isla. Few more, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
And we actually featured the Botanist in the video that Sean made that you just saw, not even knowing that Karen would be here and not even trying.
Why is that though?
Because we love it so much.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
it's so delicious.
There's a reason that it's an anchor gin in our recommendations in
They're
the
not
15
lying.
bottle bar.
Too.
It usually has about that much or less in it. In our own bar. And so it's a beautiful gin. I would love to hear from you all what gins are you using tonight. There are quite a few lovely gins that would be nice for making a martini. So I'd love to hear what you all are using in your bar. Put that in the comments. Let us know. And we're going to kick off with making a martini so you can make along with us and have something in your hands.
Let's do it. I guess I'm going to make one for you, Stefan.
You need to do it, yeah.
Yeah,
I
sure.
haven't made a cocktail in a long time.
Well, I'm glad that we got to watch that video beforehand because you learned about a few of the different ways to make a martini. I have a particular way that is my go-to, but it depends on the day, really. So, number one, I always start out with a frozen mixing vessel of some sort. It doesn't have to be a mixing glass. It could be a pint glass. It could be the bottom half of a shaker tin. Whatever you've got on hand.
Clean.
Clean is the operative word, yes.
Odorless.
And then, so I'm obviously going to be using the Botanist. I'm going to use some cold dry vermouth, Dolin French vermouth. Again, the key word here is cold. Everything should be as cold as humanly possible. So for me, I like a 50-50, and a classic 50-50 is just as it says, 50 parts, or 50-50 equal parts. So an ounce and a half of the Botanist gin, ounce and a half of vermouth, and I like to throw a couple dashes of orange bitters in there. So let's do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Down.
All right. So I start with the smallest increments first. So I'm going to go with 2, maybe 3 dashes of orange bitters. Man, this is the first time I'm using these jiggers, and I'm very, very excited about them. So I'm trying to figure out my hand placement with them. They're so fun. Ooh, they're nice. I like these a lot.
I just
So
like that
good.
you don't get any drips.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
in
the
your own
move.
bar. That's
And they're really comfortable to hold too. So
Well done.
I'm a big fan. Good job, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
And then the ounce and a half of the Bonus gin.
so good.
Oh, it's so silky. Before I worked with the brand, I was also a really big fan of the brand. It was definitely, my number one choice for gins to use in martinis because there's ice in here, right?
Yep.
This is where I'm going?
Oh yeah.
Perfection. The really beautiful thing about the Botanist is that in addition to the 9 base botanicals that go into this gin, there's also 22 hand-foraged botanicals that also go into this gin. So there's all the Latin names for them on the bottle if you ever need a cheat sheet. But and it just makes really, really beautiful martinis.
I'm already excited about this.
This is a good one. It's just so smooth. Stefan and I were also talking about the techniques of making a really proper martini, not to disrupt the liquid too much and holding it with chopsticks. We might have to go through that.
Yeah, we'll have to go through it after you've made the drink for sure. When the audio is a little easier to listen to.
This is your moment of zen.
I want to do like a whole ASMR video on cocktails because I feel like we're all missing being at a cocktail bar, and there's like these like audio components that like really satisfy, and this is definitely one. And I'm talking over it right now. So, whoops.
It's looking pretty right to me. All right.
There's a glassware in the freezer.
Glassware in the freezer. That's where we're going.
So we have some of the gins that folks are using at home include the Botanist,
Fantastic.
Yes!
Good job.
Ransom Gin, Bombay London Dry, Bombay
Solid.
Sapphire, almost exclusively, says Jamie. Thinking about the Rogue Spruce Gin or the Nolet Silver.
Mm.
Okay.
We got Hendrix, St. George, and Roku Gin. We've got such a variety of gins here.
Roku is delightful.
Oh, I'm just
That's a great
salivating.
served Martini.
Big old fan.
Jamie says, I miss hearing stirring and shaking behind the bar. So
It's
thank you
true.
for that.
I was gonna say it's such like it's my white noise. I don't like the sound of white noise, but that is my white noise. Okay, so here's the big thing about martinis. It's just such a personal thing that everyone's got their own way to make it and their own way of garnishing it. But because this is my time, I'm gonna garnish it my way.
I mean, we brought you in here to make your martini, not mine, not
Fair enough.
Sean's, not Rachel's.
It's just that fall of citrus everywhere. So on my 50/50s, I prefer both a twist and an olive. I think I haven't had a blue cheese olive in years, so I say let's do it.
I say let's
Let's
just
do
yeah,
it.
go for it.
I think my problem with the blue cheese olive is how nasty it looks in the brine. But
Yeah.
the taste makes up for it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Sean's been experimenting with blue cheese and hand stuffing olives, and so we bought like
I
4
mean,
different
these are
kinds
really
of blue
nice.
cheese. We
Yeah.
found that the Danish, there's
Did
this
such a good
Danish,
job.
yeah, this Danish blue cheese that was like, it was just really beautiful and creamy and not like overpoweringly blue.
Yeah, it's
like
the
it.
softer
Mhm.
Danish blue cheese. I think is my favorite so far.
Are you piping it in with a pastry bag, or are you just shoving it in?
Just shoving with
Shove it in with your
really small
fingers.
spoon and
Love it, love it. Technique.
So yeah, so here's my style of a martini, a 50/50 with orange bitters, and then both a twist and an olive.
Perfect.
who's gonna drink it?
I mean, I made it for Stefan. I haven't
Yeah,
made
bring
a,
it on.
I haven't
Bring that on back over here.
I haven't made a drink for a guest other than my husband in almost a year. So there you
I'm
go.
gonna tell Mitch. I got the Mitch treatment, the Mitch
Well-
Ono treatment.
That's his martini you're drinking right there.
He's not gonna miss it. He's in New Zealand having a good time.
He's not having a good
I
time. My husband's
Nice.
currently in a quarantine hotel in New Zealand, not because he has COVID, but because he traveled there.
Because Americans can't be trusted.
We'll go somewhere else.
So this
with
is
that.
really excellent, right? You get that beautiful lemon peel, lemon oil pop on the
Mhm.
nose. It definitely follows through with bringing out all those citrus elements from the vermouth, as well as the botanicals from the gin. That is perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not getting the blue cheese yet. I bet you if I let it sit a little bit, then some of that blue cheese
when
will
it
leach
warms up
in.
a little.
Yeah, but it's
I-
perfectly chilled and diluted. It's excellent. I haven't had a martini in a little bit, and this brings me back to some amazing memories at bars.
Yeah,
With good
that's
people.
what I miss the most. I particularly like both the twist and the olive with a botanist martini because I mentioned before that there were 22 hand-forged botanicals within the gin itself, but there's such a range of botanicals that depending on the vermouth, sometimes depending on the temperature, when you take that sip of your martini, you taste different things. There's 3 types of wild mint. There's heather. There's some strange ones, gorse and lady's bedstraw. And unless you've tasted or smelled those things, you wouldn't know what they were. But they have these really familiar scents or flavors that, depending on how you make your martini, and this goes for quite a few gins, depending on the botanical build, that's what you're going to get out of it. So
Right.
there's sort of these infinite combinations.
And I feel like with the martini, because it's so pure, it really is that like showcase for the gin, Whereas like, bee's knees or something like that, like obviously you're gonna get a different flavor out of it depending on what gin you use. But
Yeah.
this one in particular, obviously because there's so few ingredients, so elegant, so simple, it really will highlight the gin. So it makes sense that, when we see on our feed when people are talking about their favorite gins for a martini and they're very steadfast, it totally makes sense because this is the cocktail that will highlight everything you love about your favorite gin.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this earlier that it's such a personal journey. There are just 1 or 2 wrong ways to make a martini, but in theory and reality, when you say I'd like a martini, it's one of those cocktails that it has to be clarified, like what kind of martini, what kind of vermouth, how do you like it, because it's such a personal thing.
Right. I'm also surprised that nobody's mentioned their favorite vodka for a martini too, right? 'Cause that's something. I mean, the vodka martini is a very prevalent cocktail, in the national compendium, and one that's been highlighted in numerous Bond flicks and what have you. So there's always that like fight between vodka martini drinkers and gin martini drinkers, but like it's what you love. That's what what you should be making, right?
And I think there's a place for a vodka martini. It just depends on how you like it.
So for those of you who decided to make your martini at home with vodka instead of gin, there's no shame in that. You can come out of the vodka.
I'm a fan. I'm not gonna lie. I'm an equal opportunity martini drinker.
Yep.
Tell me what you're drinking.
So let us know what vodka you're using if you're making a vodka martini, which I think Sean told us in the video is called technically a kangaroo, for those of you
It is a kangaroo, yeah.
that want that little bit of
the
knowledge.
vodka martini will highlight your favorite vermouth really well, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's really the shining star in a vodka martini. Unless you're not
100%.
adding vermouth. In that case, you're showing off the vodka.
Exactly.
In the water, whatever water type you have. Hard water, soft water.
Where how clear your ice is.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love it if some of you in our audience would put some questions that you might have in the chat. Whatever you want to ask Karen or Stefan or me. These are our experts obviously here tonight, but I'm happy to jump in if and when you need an opinion from someone else behind the bar. But as we're collecting some of those questions, I was wondering if you could chat about one of the things we were talking about before this went live, which was vermouth and the use of vermouth in the martini, and how that maybe has evolved over time as people have appreciated or not appreciated vermouth, as different vermouth options have been available or not, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stefan and I both started bartending at around the same time, 2 years ago. I'm kidding.
It was, I still remember it like it was yesterday.
It was not yesterday. But yeah, I mean, I remember, the first time I stood behind a bar, it was in the south end of Boston.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bar owned by a very cranky old man, but, he he taught me the ropes. I learned probably most of my best guest services lessons in that bar.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, when I was told to make a martini, obviously, it was free poured without a pour spout.
Without a pour spout.
Yeah, and
Love
I mean, vermouth was intended to rinse the glass and you chuck it over your shoulder, usually leaving like spots on the back wall. But that was kind of my first introduction to it, and then it over the course of the cocktail renaissance, it's changed. I mean, I remember my first martinis were just shaken vodka, and it wasn't a martini unless it had ice chips floating over the top.
I remember that.
That was particular.
Ducks on a pond.
Ducks on a pond, exactly. Oh God, we are.
I want ducks on a pond.
We
Okay,
are
I know
really
exactly what you are.
What you want, or it got to the point that people wanted them shaken and they wanted their dirty ice on the side. Their spent ice on the side, not dirty. But yeah, and then the cocktail renaissance happened, and then suddenly, if you ordered a vodka martini, most bartenders would say no. Most craft bartenders would say no at a certain point, and then the focus, came to how much vermouth. Is it dirty? Is it perfect? Is it royale? It's just changed so much.
And
we're
like
at
it
now.
got to the point where I think I can remember that the first person that ordered a martini at the first bar I worked at. And
Where was it?
it was at the old Spaghetti Factory in Jack London Square, Oakland. Believe it or not. Yeah, they threw the Mr. Boston's book at me and said, "Go, kid, have fun with that." And the first guy came in and ordered Glenfiddich on the rocks, and I didn't even know what bottle that was. I think a couple beers came in, and then the first martini order came in, and I shook that vodka as hard as I possibly could, and I poured it right into a glass with a bunch of ice chips floating in it.
Yeah.
A couple of blue cheese stuffed olives, and I was off running. But I can also remember the first Martinez order that came through.
Yeah, and there's that whole argument
Right.
whether or not the Martinez was the predecessor to the Martini, or if it was just
Another classic cocktail.
the inverted Martini, if you will.
Right, and I don't know. I mean, obviously the Martinez calls for a totally different vermouth, right? Like an Italian style vermouth. So I don't know. Like the Martini definitely feels more French to me. The Martinez definitely feels more Italian inspired.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a town in the Bay Area named Martinez for a couple years in high school, and there's actually a plaque out there that says that it was the birthplace of the Martini, and I mean it was totally bogus, right? Like you could probably have a case for the birthplace of the Martinez, but definitely not a case for the birthplace of the Martini.
But that opens up a whole other can of worms, is that a lot of people would say that the only reason a Martini is called a Martini was because it was the marketing campaign for Martini and Rossi.
Yep.
Where you would ask for, a spirit and martini. That was the order. That's how you ordered a Manhattan. That's how you ordered a martini. It's, any kind of
There's probably
spirit-forward
there's
cocktail.
definitely some
And
truth
in
to
fact,
that.
if you still go to, I had a friend tell me a couple of years ago, they went and they were traveling in Italy and they ordered a martini at the bar and somebody took out the bottle of vermouth, poured him a glass. Here you go. Here's your martini.
And that's also delicious. I love drinking vermouth on ices.
Italian cocktails, if it's not a Negroni or a Spritz or some sort of Scroppino or something like that, they start to head into the abyss down there.
There are some really
Any
wonderful
Italians
bars
on the
there.
line today?
There are some really wonderful bars.
Io sono italiano, so I'm in there.
I mean,
But we obviously have some really amazing aperitif cocktails, or more digestive style cocktails with the Mari and what have you. But we're more like sip on an Amaro on the rocks, or have.
I think I have some Italian in me.
Yeah, but I mean, our
I'm
bars.
just from New Jersey.
I love those
There's
Amari.
a few cocktail bars that are really amazing in Italy, but most of the bars in Italy are either wine bars or they're British pubs.
Because they make really good wine.
They make great wine. Yeah.
But anyway, so I think at the end of the day, the journey for vermouth has just come so far that now, beyond, like, people know that vermouth belongs in a martini at this point if you are patronizing a craft cocktail bar or a cocktail bar in general. That now I think the next eventual step, because bartenders are already there, is just vermouth drinks.
Mhm.
Yes, let's do it. Bamboos for days.
The bamboo cocktail is one of my favorites.
That'll probably be another episode.
Yeah.
It will. Yeah, we'll get there. As soon as we add an expansion pack for the sherries.
Oh, yeah. We're definitely doing sherry cocktails
I'm already
at some
asking
point.
these two to
Ooh.
add that.
So we have a few more people tuning in. We have somebody doing a 50-50 with botanist and shiso bitters,
Ooh.
which I've never had.
John, are these shiso bitters you've made yourself, or do you buy them somewhere? Tell me about it.
Tell us about those bitters.
Tell me about
You're gonna
it.
want-
Tell us about the bitters you all are using.
Yeah.
Tell us about the vermouths you're using.
Yeah.
We've had Dolan as a staple in our bar because it is a staple. It's a staple and it's very readily available here. But one of our customers and members told us about a place to buy much better vermouth in San Diego that I have to go check out in Old Town.
Okay.
But I think that's the next part in my journey is where can I now go and explore different high quality and more premium vermouths and explore how that changes in the martini. Because I will admit, like, I didn't go as far as Churchill with the swish of vermouth around in the glass and throw it out.
Mm-hmm.
But our favorite recipe at home is a 3-to-1. So it's like heavy on the gin.
Yeah.
We love botanist, so it makes it easy. Martin Miller's is another one that's really nice.
That's my number 2.
It's my
I love you guys.
Yeah, told you
That's my number
told you to
2.
be best friends.
Something about that, like, that glacial ice melt.
Yep.
And the citrus flavors with the lemon peel, like the lemon twist on that.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's just that perfect English style of
I also
gin.
like that boxer gin that just came out with a bunch of what's in that? It's a bunch of bergamot. It's insane. It's so good. Yeah, highly recommend trying that. Also, play off that citrus element in a martini.
So James is also having the botanist in Wisconsin.
Nice.
John says the shiso bitters are Japanese bitters. They are amazing but expensive. You can find them at Bitters and Bottles. So South San Francisco.
Yeah, that's
and
a
I
great
think they'll ship.
location.
So I think
It's a
they'll
great
ship.
spot. Yeah, they'll ship.
Most
for
of
sure.
our favorite
mostly
bar
around the country.
places are
Yeah.
shipping now.
Welcome to COVID.
Okay, Andy's coming in from Buffalo.
Welcome, Andy.
2.5 to 1 martini.
Ooh.
I like that. Okay.
Martin Miller's to Dolan.
That is a boozy martini.
2 dashes Reagan's with a lemon twist. Well, I'm at a 3-to-1, so yeah, of course.
You know what?
Well, it's actually 2.5 to half. You
Sure.
can call it 3-to-1 if you want.
Oh, 3-to-1 ratio.
2.5 to half.
3-to-1
Yeah,
ratio,
2.5 to 1.
one
Yeah,
of
2
my
times.
one of my favorite bars in Los Angeles is a bar called Thunderbolt.
a great bar.
Bartender owned and operated, opened just before shutdown in March last year.
It's one of the best bars in the States.
It honestly is. And one of the offerings that they started making, they just did such an incredible job of just figuring out how to do it right after every single shutdown. And they were championing the freezer martini. So you would go and just buy pre-diluted, they have 4 or 5 different fridges and freezers, and they're all set to different temperatures because they got one of the guys who owns it, Mike Capaferri, is a genius when it comes to carbonation, which also involves a lot of temperature control. But the point of this is that they were selling freezer martinis, and I think you could choose between 50-50, 3-to-1, and 5-to-1, maybe, which I assume would be the swish and but
and they're like really crushing like the COVID hospitality, and I feel like they've done it right, and they've like planned it out really well. So if you happen to be in Southern California and are looking for places that feel safe as we're starting to head out of this pandemic, I highly recommend Thunderbolt. And you can buy most of the cocktails to go. They're canned, they're ready to go, or the freezers, they're in bottles.
Yeah. Or if you're not in LA, buy their merch. Buy their merch. Buy
Yes,
their swag.
yeah, definitely. They've got great dad hats. I got one.
Great dad hats.
We had a question from Maria. What was that little fork that pushed the olives down into the drink?
Oh.
That is our newest little tool. We got that from
So
our local spot, Collins and Coop, which also ships.
So to be honest, this was maybe the second time in my entire life using one of these. I don't know if you guys watched me struggle, but I did. So I don't know if you can focus in. So it's kind of like a little syringe, and it very hygienically will grab whatever it is you're getting out of a jar, and then you can push it off without having to like flick it off.
Yeah.
So
They're
that
the
was my
best.
way of describing it, but yeah.
They're the best.
Well, we've always just used like a bar spoon or like
tweezers.
or you try to at home, especially if the olives are full at the top, you just kind of like jab
Stab
your
it,
cocktail
yeah.
pick in
But when
there.
you're down to the last
You
couple,
can't-
you start doing this, like you're looking
and you're
around
like
for it,
fishing,
yeah.
like bobbing for apples. So
Yeah.
that can be handy.
You start smelling like
Yeah, I
start
think
smelling
that
like
shit's
brine.
Okay, so Diane asks,
Oh,
what was your
okay,
technique for expressing the oils from the lemon peel?
Mm.
I love this question.
This is a good moment for Sean to like really punch in.
So I'm sure Stefan's the same way. I've taught quite a few bartenders how to get going on their journey to bartending. And a lot of it has to do, if your peel is breaking, that means your twist is too shallow. And there's nothing structurally holding it together. So actually this peeler and then an OXO Y peeler are also really great because they give you just the right amount of pith underneath to hold on to all those oils. So my technique, how close do I have to get to this?
No, you're good. Right there.
Right here? Okay, so what I do is I, in one hand, very, very tightly hold my fruit, be it an orange or lemon or a grapefruit, and I start with my thumb on the bottom, sort of giving me leverage, and then the top of my peeler, I'll sort of just dig it in just at the top. And then what you want to do, instead of pulling your peeler down, you want to push with your thumb. Of course, now that I'm showing you, it doesn't work. There you go. So you want to push with your thumb, and then you get a really nice, sexy little piece
Show the back of that. Yeah.
that has enough pith to hold onto all those oils. So like when I touch this, my finger is wet. If you just take this peel off, you're not going to get anything. So I think if I were to do this at the camera, so you just, you want to pinch it.
Which direction? Do you want the white facing you or white facing the drink?
Oh, so the pith faces you because the oils will express outward. And what you want to do is pinch it, and the pith will sort of hold the peel together, but it'll express, oh, it smells like lemons out here, will express it outwards. Another thing, I know a lot of people are very into flaming their peels to heat up the oils inside their citrus peel to make it a little more rich. A, don't do it with a lighter because you're just breathing in butane. And second, don't touch the peel with it. If you want to heat it up, just kind of take a match and warm it up from the outside, but then spray it directly at the flame.
Great. We're getting a couple questions about lemon peels some more.
Okay.
Do you melt the wax off your lemon prior to zesting? I think it makes a difference.
Scrub your citrus.
Yeah.
It's
Your citrus.
disgusting.
Yeah, for sure. And it depends on where you get your citrus
Yeah.
too, right? We're here in Southern California, it's citrus season. So generally what we're getting at farmers markets or at some of the specialty shops are straight off the farm, no wax dipped, never even seen a cold box, which means that they're super vibrant, really juicy. But other times of the year, yeah, we end up with really nasty, like waxy citrus. So yeah, definitely scrub them. It'll get rid of all
What
that
is
waxy
that?
barrier that'll allow you to really express that
What is that?
lemon oils
Peeler?
really well.
Yeah.
Also something to keep in mind when
This
you're
is
looking,
you.
when you're
what
shopping
is
for
that peel?
citrus, these dimples are kind of a sign of how thick the actual pith is, or how thick the peel is. So you actually want to look for this kind of dimply look, especially with oranges. If it's really smooth, if the skin is really smooth, there's very little oil in there, and you're going to be sad that
It's sort of your telltale sign,
Yeah.
other than color, that it's unripe.
Exactly. So look for like really heavy dimpled citrus if you can find it.
We had another question about what peeler this is. Whose peeler is this?
This is a peeler. I don't even know the brand. We also got this from
Collins
our
and Coop sells it.
Yep.
local barware shop, Collins and Coop. You can also order online.
The other
It's
one I
really
suggest, it's
heavy-duty.
not as pretty, but I feel like in the many years that I've used all sorts of peelers, the best in my opinion on expressing and getting like a really good swath of citrus peel are the Kurpinsky piranhas, which kind of look similar to this, but they look cheap. They look like cheaply made, but it's really not about the base as much as this is really beautiful. But this actual blade is the most important part to get the best peel, and their technology on the blade part is just insane. Obviously, this is really sexy. I want this behind my bar, but I'll use those Kurpinsky even though you have to replace them every couple of years because you get a better peel.
Mhm.
You
See,
you differ.
Yeah,
from
that's really funny that you say that because I feel like it's so much more about your technique than the peeler because I
Right.
have always only stocked those like 99-cent store Y peelers. So they have the
Yeah.
same shape
Right.
as this. Everyone knows what they look like. They're short, sort of fat handles and
But those
and
are made
two
by
bars.
Kurpinsky too. It's the
Maybe that's
same.
why,
It's the
because
same
they're
blade.
great.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've always bought these peelers for less than $5.
Yep.
And they just work so well. Honestly, the biggest thing, and bartenders get so nervous because everyone peels their knuckles off when they first start trying. It all has to do with
It's
your
technique
thumb.
based for sure.
Yeah,
And
your
the,
thumb is so
and
important.
the thing to keep in
peeling.
mind when you're worried about like taking your fingers off is making sure that all of your fingers. Hello, hey,
Hey.
hand model. I'm a hand model now. You don't
I'm
want to
Vanna White
hold
it.
the citrus like this, right?
No.
What is this doing? You're
You're
gonna
gonna
hit
get
this
fucked
pinky like, and this is what
Makes
I
me
mean.
nervous.
Bartenders in a busy bar do this all the time. They just take half of their pinky off,
Mhm.
and then they're bleeding all over the cocktails. It's amazing. We've all done it. So you want to make sure that you have all your fingers tucked. I usually teach my bartenders to kind of like tuck in and like kind of dig in with your nails. And that way you can get it all out of the way, right? So now you've got this beautiful swath. You can go down here once again using the this method, this thumb method as your guide, and using that to push and pull off of. But yeah, now there is no way I'm going to injure myself because I've got all of my fingers completely tucked in, so we're not losing any digits on this.
And that
Those
grabbing
digits.
the peel with your thumb before you finish
Right.
peeling it out is
Sure.
another great one.
It also looks pretty.
Yeah.
Looks pretty sexy when
Yeah.
you bartenders do that.
So I feel like we've covered a lot on garnish.
I mean, that's super important, right?
It's
We should
good.
drink with our eyes.
I know it's really good that everyone focused in on that. I love that.
Who has other questions about martinis?
I feel like I did see one on like not the origin of the martini, but where the martini fits in you know the
Sure.
cocktail families of cocktails.
Mhm.
And I think when I teach bartenders how to bartend, I always like to teach in sort of pie graphs, and I always separate everything into you can go through the way. They're broken down like slings and cocktails and highballs or toddies or whatever it is. But if we're thinking, for those of you who are making your cocktails at home, just generally how to think about them, there's kind of 4 major categories for me. And it'd be sours, which are those that include citrus, sweet, and spirit. There's cocktail, which are like an old fashioned, for me anyway, which are sugar, water, bitters, and spirit. A martini, a Manhattan, a Martinez, anything stirred and served up, to me is in the aromatic family, where it's mostly spirit, a little bit of wine-based. So it could be aperitif, it could be vermouth, it could be anything like that, and bitters. So this is in the aromatic family to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way we made it today with the bitters, technically you could call that a cocktail, right? Because it's got spirit, water, sugar, and bitter.
Yeah, but it's
There's
not,
sugar
yeah.
in the vermouth, even dry vermouth has sugar.
But that's the difference between cocktail and aromatic, though.
Right.
Because cocktail, I know this because it is why Collectif 1806 is called Collectif 1806,
Sure.
because it was the first utterance of the word cocktail. And cocktail is meant to be a mix that is specifically sugar,
Right,
where this aromatic is not.
right.
But that's getting technical.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that you're onto something there. It's in its own little category with very few
But it
other
also
cocktails.
depends on the school of thought.
Right.
It
Because
does.
bartenders come from different sort of like trees of
Yeah,
their
lineage,
their ethos.
Yeah, there's like 3
so
or
we're
4
different.
like original cocktail bartenders during the
Mhm.
Renaissance that kind of train their staff, and everybody comes off their tree, and they all have like
For
little,
sure.
little different variances of the exact same thing, right? Because there's
100%. It's
there's
just what
only
you
a
call
couple. There's only like a handful of ways to balance a cocktail, and
Mhm.
once you learn all those, like you've got a good base. And so this one is a very unique cocktail that I think everybody should be able to make a really good one at home, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
take a whole lot,
Mhm.
just a couple little key remember. Don't forget this, don't forget that kind of business. There's no like heavy prep involved. You can make these. You can make these, batch them in a bottle that's properly diluted, and have them in your freezer, and just knock them out during happy hour at your leisure. great cocktail, the Martini?
We've got some really
So
good,
many good questions.
really good questions. A couple around vermouth.
Okay.
But if you want to start with Tom's question, I have a friend who really prefers sweeter drinks.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a variation that is good for someone who is more sensitive to the raw alcohol taste? That would also be my mother.
Mm-hmm. My mother as well. I think that, yes, 100%. There are totally a million ways to do this. And that's why I like to teach my bartenders how to bartend in terms of pie graphs. Because the best thing about pie graphs is that they can always be adjusted.
Sure.
So if you do want something a little sweeter, you can, start with a 50-50 or maybe go to an inverted 2-to-1 with 2 ounces of vermouth and an ounce of gin or vodka. Or you can split the parts of your cocktail and add a liqueur.
Sure.
One of my favorite liqueurs to throw into a gin and vermouth martini is pear liqueur.
Sure.
It's one of my absolute favorites. Or I forget the bar that did it. I think it was Normandy Club in Los Angeles, but Douglas Fir liqueur was incredible with a touch of salted honey. You can add whatever you want to a martini.
Salt's a nice touch too if you're going to add a little bit more sweetness.
Chef
100%.
kiss.
Yeah,
Chef kiss.
totally. It's so silly because it seems like such a basic thing to do, but I mean, I've always taught all my bartenders to salt every sour,
Mm-hmm.
and every cocktail station, every bar station would have just a little, salt bay, right? And just like a little pinch of salt before you shake.
Don't salt bay it.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
But we were old
yeah.
school, right? Like you could easily make a 4-to-1, saline solution that would be better, but we were old school. But yeah, I'm a little bit more pragmatic on that, answering that question from my perspective. If your grandmother doesn't really like the overly alcoholic taste of something like a martini, I would steer her away from direct stirred cocktails, probably, right?
Sure.
I would probably be like, well, maybe we try a fizz or a sour or long drink.
I think that's where. Oh my god, the name of the cocktail is. I think that's where lemon drop came from.
Sure.
It's people that did not necessarily want a martini, but they were interested in that style of drink.
Mm-hmm.
Almost a sour. There's not enough.
I know it's almost a sour.
It's just like the Crusta.
Yeah.
It's from the Crusta family of almost a sour.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
add more sugar and syrup, and you've got yourself a sour. But
Yeah.
it's like a very boozy daisy variation,
Yeah.
right?
Or if you're a purist and you really want this is what the definition of a martini is and I want it, try Old Tom Gin.
Yeah.
There's sugar in that.
Totally.
We had a great suggestion here from John. He said, try Old Tom Gin,
Oh, he
play with
did.
different vermouths. Thank
Yeah.
you, John.
Mm-hmm. I get you. I see you.
And vermouths come from 3 major. I mean, obviously now vermouth is made everywhere, but historically, vermouth has come from France or it's come from Italy, and then there's also a Spanish component as well. But the Spanish don't mix their vermouth, so they add a lot of citric acid to it. So it's not something.
Sherry.
So it's really great to have on its own in the afternoon, just to sip on some vermouth and then move to sherry. But it's not really great to mix in a cocktail because it'll change the pH too much. But when you're looking at Italian style versus French style is usually in the drier, this Dolin dry is a French vermouth, and whereas the Italian vermouths are generally sweeter. That's where sweet vermouth comes from. The Martini Rossi style is a very sweetened aromatic wine.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, obviously, Dolin has dry blanc. They have a sweet vermouth as well. But their sweet vermouth, you'll see if you compare a Dolin style sweet vermouth versus an Italian style sweet vermouth, they're totally different. It's got a totally different herbaceous quality to it, right? If you smell Carpano or some of the Martini Rossi, some of those sweet vermouths, they have almost a pizza quality to them, right? Because there's
oregano.
Yeah, there's oregano. There's Italian
Pizza.
herbs and spices, right? So that's what they have to offer.
No, but those are my favorite ones that are oregano heavy.
Yeah, totally.
So if you were going to introduce a liqueur, the pear liqueur that you mentioned into martini, what would be a ratio that you might use?
Good question.
Yeah,
Gin to
that's a
vermouth
great
to
question.
liqueur.
So if the request is I just want a flavored martini versus I don't like the taste of alcohol, those two are 2 different recipes for sure. So if you are sensitive to the taste of alcohol, I would base it off of 50-50. So it would be 1.5 ounces of gin. It would be 1.25 ounces to 1.5 ounces of vermouth, and then 1/4 ounce of that liqueur and salt. That would be my go-to.
Yeah.
If you do enjoy the taste of spirits, but you just want something flavored, that's when I would drop things down. It would stay my 2 ounces of my gin or vodka, my base spirit, and then I would drop the vermouth to 3/4 and then add a 1/4 ounce to 2 ounces of a liqueur.
1/4 ounce to a 1/2 ounce?
It depends on what I'm using. Like if it's a liqueur that has a higher ABV, for instance, Cointreau.
Yeah, you guys crushed the Cointreau laced Martini with Collectif, right?
It's close by.
I know, always. If you love the kind of citrus component that comes from a simple, beautiful Martini variation like this, you can bump it up using, something like Cointreau. And then you can add an orange peel garnish to kind of play off of those beautiful orange notes.
Nice.
It's really spectacular.
Yeah, or you can go for a London Column.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorites.
We've got some requests for other vermouths you might recommend.
Okay.
Awesome.
John says Koki makes an amazing line of vermouths. What else you got?
Mancino. If you like Italian style vermouths, Mancino makes some really spectacular stuff. Highly recommend them.
If you're interested in getting weird and local, like something completely new style, Lo-Fi is a really cool American brand. They make some really unconventional vermouths, but they're really interesting. I also would advise everyone to experiment with sherry. Sherry is a great way to go about it, and you can, it obviously might alter the color of your martini, but there's something really beautiful about a martini with Fino or Amontillado.
Exactly.
That's my jam.
Yeah,
Also, my
sherry
dog's
won't
name
have
is
sherry won't have
Amontillado.
the herbaceous qualities that the vermouth will.
But it adds something entirely different.
It adds like a nutty, kind of complex quality to it that
Dry,
will totally change the complexity and the interest of your drink. It's a really cool. I just recommend people to revisit sherry whenever possible.
Yeah. Or, if you are looking for something that has a little more sweetness to it and you don't want to go the liqueur route, try a Vermouth Bianco. That's always a good option.
Yeah, so that's something to keep in mind too, right? So even when you're thinking in terms of like French style vermouths, there is that very dry style, which is what we use today, which has kind of a nice drying sensation on. Even though there is some sugar, there's a Brix level in a dry vermouth, but there's also this thing called Blanc vermouth, which is also a clear vermouth that has a higher sugar content, which will totally change the way that you perceive the flavors in the martini, right? Because that sugar will play on your palate in a way that some of the herbs and the spices and the elements of the gin and the vermouth will come out in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you haven't tried a Bianco or a Blanc vermouth, French or Italian versions of it, try that.
We
it's
have
a really
some
interesting way to go.
We're gonna skip ahead too, but when we get to the Negroni, like a Blanc vermouth and a Negroni is amazing.
We have a Blanc vermouth in our little mini fridge, and when we run out of the dry, we just move on to the Blanc.
Yeah.
And then we
That's
come
perfect.
back, and it's
Might
nice.
as well.
We had a couple of suggestions. I'm going to share cross-platform.
I haven't heard that cocktail in a while.
Which one?
Deep Blue Sea. I haven't made that in years.
No way.
Eric recommends either the Zephyr or the Deep Blue Sea for those who like slightly sweeter drinks.
The Deep Blue Sea, as far as I remember it, was creme de violette.
Our favorite.
Oh, great.
That's the
Or-
cocktail
or-
journey's favorite sneaky ingredient.
Or was that an arsenic and old lace? No, arsenic and old lace.
That's an arsenic and old lace,
Are you
right?
sure? Ooh, God, I gotta go.
Deep Blue Sea,
revisit
you're gonna take us on the Wayback Machine.
Who's got the differ guide ready to go here on this one?
Sarah shared, not sure what you call it, but my mother-in-law had a bartender suggest she try a float of Sauvignon Blanc in her martini once. Despite how it sounded, we gave it a shot. Delicious. It's called the Eileen I Martini in her honor.
I love it.
I was gonna say, I don't know if
love
I'm gonna
it.
find that in a cocktail.
Have you
book,
ever
but-
used that trick? I used to use that trick all the time behind the bar when somebody would like basically come up with their own cocktail, like
You
just
name it after
cowboy
them.
one. And they're like, "What do you call that?" I'm like, "What's your name?" Like,
How many
Stan. I'm
numbers
like,
did you get out of that one?
a lot.
It was great.
That's
Never
not
called
real.
them, but yeah, no, but that's a good trick, and I love that idea, and I'm glad that somebody else uses it for their family.
I love that.
But
I
yeah.
could see how Sarah says it's still very crisp, but it made it milder for those who aren't normally martini drinkers or don't love the strong spirit-forward nature. So it could
I
be a
get
good,
that.
like, you know,
Once
a good
again,
transition from
switching
wine.
aromatic wine to
Mhm.
straight wine, which is an awesome play. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's an underused, move for
Yeah.
bartenders.
I would also, I would be so bold as to say that bartender was not interested in making a 50-50
No.
or an inverse. So it's probably
Mhm.
the same idea. Like the
It's
float,
100%.
the float of wine was instead of adding more vermouth in the beginning. So
Yeah.
I like where their head's at.
Well-
Not the direction I would have gone, but
Right,
you
but
were
like
saying that-
10, 15 years ago, that rudimentary, oh, look, I just happenstance against a 50-50 martini, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
incredible. That's,
10 years ago, I probably would have poured Sprite on it and called it a press.
yeah, for sure, right? Like, the old press. Does anybody still order a press?
Oh, you know what? I made myself a press not too long ago with some Mount Gay Black Barrel, and it was delicious.
All right.
The press.
A couple of comments about barrel aging martinis.
Sorry.
Andy
you have
said
strong feelings about strongly barrel-aged cocktails?
I have strong feelings about oxidation.
he says
Right,
there's,
right,
and that's what John also commented on is the oxidation of the vermouth.
Mhm.
And so I think that this could
What
be
I
a
would
good.
suggest
this
is
could be a
that you
sig-
barrel rest the gin
Yeah.
and then add your vermouth
Yes,
in
thank
to
you.
order. That's the way to do it
Thank
because
you.
wine will oxidize so quickly. It's what makes vermouth so special is that it's oxidized wine. But if you let it go too far, I was over at another way to put this is that I was at Barkeeper yesterday
Mhm.
and talking to the team over there, and there's a brand of bitters that's made locally in LA that has great ideas. That they leave the elements that they, if it's a cardamom bitters, they leave the cardamom pods in the bitter bottle.
Mhm.
And we were talking doesn't that over infuse at some point, right? It's the same way with
Yeah,
vermouth, is that
especially
it's
it's in
already
high growth.
oxidized. If you add it into a situation where you can add more oxygen to it, it could over oxidize, which I would be careful about that. If it's
Yeah.
a couple weeks, you might be able to get away with it. Especially if you'll have to adjust the recipe. It can't be an equal parts martini. If it was a 3-to-1, you might be able to get away with it in a couple weeks worth of barrel aging. But if you're trying to lay something down for an extensive amount of time, I would just leave out any element that could sour.
I feel like I need to explain why I had such a strong reaction to this question. So, quite a few years ago, I took over a bar program that ended up being my favorite job I've ever had in my entire life. I will leave their name out of it for now. But they were very, very much known for their barrel-aged cocktails. And
Great
when
spot.
It was a wonderful bar. But they were very known for their barrel-aged cocktails, which was the first thing when I walked in the door I tried to nix. Not an option. So I had to think creatively and figure out how to do it because their method was make cocktails in gallon form and dump them in barrel. That doesn't work. That doesn't taste good.
Right.
And the higher proof your alcohol is, which bitters are higher proof than almost everything that goes in that's what you're going to taste whenever you take it out of the barrel. So my suggestion for whoever asked that question and my solution for what I did with them was rather than aging a cocktail with vermouth or wine-based products in the barrel, I soaked the barrel in them first. So they had a whole month to cure with said oxidized wine to get all of those really great,
It's a good move.
flavors out of it, and then I dumped it. And then I put everything else in the barrel,
So smart.
and then I used my wine-based component.
That's a really
Sure.
awesome move. It's
I'm
it's not
doing
a
it
fiscally
okay.
responsible move.
Well, no, actually,
point of clarification:
Yeah.
you soaked the barrel in the bitters first.
Wine.
the wine
The
first.
wine.
So basically, when the barrel was empty,
Uh-huh.
I took all of our half-open bottles that were bound for the trash anyway, and I filled the barrel with it, and then every couple of days we rotated it, we shook it so that all of the inside of the barrel was coated. And because that wine was going in the trash anyway,
So you didn't wait.
it wasn't wasted. It served its second purpose.
Uh-huh.
So there you go.
The other
That's
thing
sorry I
I used
reacted
to love
so
doing,
much.
if you, we should do
It's
a
always a
little,
story.
Yeah.
because there are some ways to be more creative with your barrel aged.
Right here.
For me, I would use an Amaro or something and just barrel age that for a week or less, just to get a little barrel flavor, and then knock that out and actually use that in a cocktail. And now you've seasoned that barrel, kind of like you.
Mhm.
That way-
Season is the word.
Yeah, so then you can put a Vieux Carré in there, but not do that. Just do the rye
Yeah.
right? Put the rye and the brandy in there, and then let that soak, and then you bring it out and you add everything else to it. And you've got a barrel-aged cocktail, but you didn't put any vermouth in there, you didn't put the Benedictine or any of that stuff. So that's another way to get around it. But yeah, you got to be careful. The things that will spoil like lower proof, wine-based things are definitely oxygen and light. So
Yeah.
So you guys, we only have a few minutes left
Okay.
on our live stream, and we have a lot of good comments. But I want to go back up to one that Diana asked earlier about method. She said, you mentioned earlier about not disturbing the liquid while stirring.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that and the benefits of stirring instead of shaking?
yeah.
Yeah.
We covered that a little bit last week too, right?
We did,
when I mentioned
You
that.
take this one.
It's worth repeating, though. I think
I
it's
covered
really
this a little
important.
bit last week. There's two main methods to chill and dilute a cocktail, right? You've got a stirred method and you have a shaken method. The shaken method is a much more precise way to do that job, right? Because you're adding agitation, you're adding aeration, so you're now getting that drink colder, quicker, and diluting it a little easier and faster for sure. The issue with that is that it's adding aeration. So with cocktails that are all spirits, you don't really want that aeration generally. There are always some exceptions to every rule, and there's a lot of very fancy cocktail bartenders that will either whip or pull their bamboos, but that's something a little different. In this case, we're just talking about stirring a cocktail being it's just not as easy to get where you want to go than with a shaken method. But even in saying that, you don't want over agitation. That's called bruising, right? You're basically exposing the ice, right? You don't want to break down the ice when you're stirring, unless you are trying to get to the center of a very large cube, which is the coldest point. You're just trying to get the drink as cold as possible, as quick as possible, to slow the dilution process. Because then you can stir it if you go to the Varnish, they stir their martinis for 7-8 minutes.
It was the longest wait for the most delicious martini.
It's
every second.
But they're using huge blocks of ice that they're cracking right at the moment before they stir, so that they're exposing the coldest part of that ice cube, so that it's super cold and you're chilling the drink as quick as possible. That way you can slow the dilution process and really blend that drink over this, a series of minutes.
Yeah.
But at home, you probably don't have that option. They have it because they own an ice house, and they just bring over all the leftover cubes. So yeah, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to dilute this drink in a really uniform way. And the best way to do that is not to over agitate and not to add any aeration. You want a really smooth mouthfeel on a martini. That's really paramount. Yeah. That's satin. You want satin silk.
Mm-hmm.
And you also want, I feel like every good cocktail that I've ever had in my life, I've always been impressed with how cold it is on that first sip. And that's really important. Like we talked about right from the outset, Karen was I think that was the first words out of her mouth, was you want everything to be cold. And that is true to a martini. And if you start with cold glass, you start with cold ice, and a decent way of stirring. And, let's just put it this way. When you stir, whether you stir fast or you stir slow, it's not speeding or slowing the process.
No.
And that's something, I think cocktail bartenders, when they're busy, they're just we'll stir it really fast,
You're better off letting it cook for longer while you do other things.
Sometimes Sean will stir a martini and he'll let it just sit on the bar, and he'll make his dinner, go back to making dinner for us.
And that's one of the few cocktails, the martini is one of the few cocktails where you really can get away with that, because the proper dilution is actually more than most other cocktails that are stirred. Especially old fashions, like we talked about last week, right? We actually, if you want to err on the side of over or under dilution, you want to err on the side of under dilution on an old fashioned, because you're putting it over ice at the end. It's going to continue to melt into that ice cube. Whereas the drink that you pour into this beautiful Nick and Nora or a classic martini glass or a coupe or whatever you have that's got a stem on it, that way you're not warming up the cocktail by touching it with your hands. That's the final product. It's only going to get more warm from there, but it's as diluted as it's going to get. So you really have to err on the side of actually over diluting a martini, in my opinion, than under diluting an old fashioned. So that's something to keep in mind too. That you're not going to get there any faster by agitating the ice cube. You're only going to ruin the mouthfeel.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
I love
They're
this
good.
conversation.
Yeah.
It could go on for another
It could
2
keep
hours.
going on. I'm going to ask you one last question and then one question for both of you that you have to answer very quickly.
Okay.
One,
Rapid fire.
how long can you store vermouth after it's been opened?
Refrigerated?
Refrigerated for. I'll go dry vermouth for 2 weeks.
Dry
2
vermouth for 2 weeks. Sweet vermouth for a month or more.
Yeah.
For sure. And if it's Carpano or something like that with a really high Brix level, you can actually do it for months. Almost indefinite.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
This is our closing question, and
Okay,
you have
rapid fire?
you have to answer it in 6 words or less.
Okay.
What do the martinis of the future look like?
I think they're just going to be 100% vermouth. Like really cold vermouth. I mean, if we went from like full vodka to like 50-50s, kind of like, or like 2-to-1 to 50-50s where the world is right now, we're eventually going to just get to a
Vermouth.
really well diluted vermouth.
Karen?
You're going to go back the opposite way.
Pre-made in a can.
Yeah.
Pre-made
there you
in a can. There
Totally.
it is.
Just like this amazing spot.
Vodka and.
Duh.
Oh, is that what you were thinking?
No,
Oh.
No, there's the Continental in Sydney.
Oh.
Oh, hell. Like, that is a place.
Speaking of Australia, there's another company called Vodka and they sell canned vodka. And I think it has carbonation in it, and the whole top comes off, and it's meant for you to add whatever else you want in it. Vodka and.
No, the Continental is a perfectly
Yeah.
batched 50-50 martini with the swath of garnish in there already, and you just pour it right in.
You did it in 6.
Wait.
Yep. Bottled cocktails.
Pre-made in a can.
Pre-made in a can. Okay. Bottled cocktails are definitely a big,
It's not going
huge
away after
popular
this.
wave, and it's
Why
not
would
going
you? Why
away.
Mhm.
I have been known to enjoy a few at the beach myself, and I think there's definitely a place for it. Here at the Cocktail Journey, we like to go the other way and talk about the beauty and the intentionality and the significance of bar craft. And so if you're interested in joining us for next week's live stream, we're going to be talking about the Sazerac, which is going to be very exciting. A little bit less room to play with this drink, so come with your technical notebooks, and we'll chat about some of the very specific ways that this drink should be made.
Don't drop the peel.
Don't drop the
Don't
peel.
drop the peel.
Spoiler alert. We're doing... And if you are interested in not just the live streams, but the other kinds of things that we're getting started over at the Cocktail Journey, you can go to launch.thecocktailjourney.com and check it out. You can sign up for our mailing list where you can get notified of these live streams, as well as like get the recipe in advance and that sort of thing. And then you can check out the new membership options that we just launched. We're going to be doing a bunch more for members-only content. But for the whole month of February, these live streams are completely free and open to everyone. So come and enjoy. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Good to see you all again.
Bye,
This was so
y'all.
fun.
Cheers.
Bye.
Get to your 3rd martini now.
Oh, man. So good.
That was really fun.
Yeah.